Hello and welcome to yet another edition of Yes 101's Visual Radio. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Nithmini De Silva.
And I'm Kenza Farooq. Before we take a look at your news in detail, let's take a look at your headlines.
Newsfirst headline.
In your top local stories, IMF anticipates agreement with commercial creditors soon. SJB forges alliance with the Freedom People's Congress. Wages struggle to keep pace with rising prices, says Finance Secretary. In your international news, Israel to open 3 humanitarian routes into Gaza. Finally, in sports, it's cricket. SL squad returns following Bangladesh Test series.
Now, in your top story, the International Monetary Fund says there is a strong expectation that agreements with commercial creditors consistent with program parameters will be reached by completion of Sri Lanka's second review. Julie Kozak, director of the IMF Communications Department, at a press briefing in Washington, D.C., said that there was significant progress in Sri Lanka's economic recovery efforts.
The next steps on the debt restructuring are to conclude the negotiations with external commercial creditors and to implement agreements in principle with official creditors. The domestic debt operations, part of the debt restructuring, are largely completed. And there is a strong expectation that agreements with commercial creditors consistent with program parameters will be reached by completion of the second review.
In more local news, the Samagijana Balavegya forged an alliance with the Freedom People's Congress this morning. A group of MPs representing the Freedom People's Congress, including Professor G.L. Peri, signed an agreement to join with the Samagijana Balasandanaya. The agreements were signed at the PMICH. Dr. Nalaka Gudaheva and Dilam Perera were also present for the signing of the agreement.
Now on to more local news. Sri Lanka's Finance Secretary disclosed that despite improved macroeconomic indicators, people's lives remain impacted.
In spite of the improved macroeconomic indicators, the lives and livelihood of people have not fully normalized. Whilst inflation has stabilized, wages are yet to catch up with the rapid increase in prices experienced during the worst of the crisis. For incomes to grow, the economy has to grow. The more stable macroeconomic conditions set the foundation for a recovery in economic growth, and the early signs have been positive as the fourth quarter of 2023 recorded a GDP growth of 4.5%. We should also aspire to achieve a qualitative improvement in the type of economic growth. We must aim for economic growth driven by non-debt creating inflows such as exports of goods, including agricultural exports, export of services, and foreign direct investment. Sustainable economic growth can only be achieved through the continuous enhancement in productivity, which in turn translates into growth in real wages.
International news.
In your international news, Israel says it has approved the opening of 3 humanitarian routes into Gaza to allow more aid into the territory. The Ares Gate in northern Gaza will be temporarily reopened for the first time since the start of the war. Ashdod port will be open for humanitarian deliveries, and more aid from Jordan will be allowed to enter via the Kerem Shalom crossing.
Sports news.
Now on to sports news. The Sri Lankan team returned to the island following the 2-0 series victory against Bangladesh. Sri Lanka won the first match of the Test series by 328 runs, while the Sri Lankan side led by Dhananjay De Silva managed to secure a 192-run win in the second Test. And with that, we wrap up this edition of Yes 101's Visual Radio. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Nithmini De Silva.
And I'm Kenza Farooq. Thank you for watching.